Hello, everyone. Welcome to INK&BLOOD. My name is Emre Uslu,
Mine is Kani Zulam.
and in this episode, we are going to discuss political Islam and Israel.
We are.
And go ahead.
Political Islam is a fact of life in the Middle East. Um, the region is struggling with its identity, with its place in the society in terms of governance. And there are many who want Islam to play a leading role. And when it does, unfortunately, it hasn't done well. And then there's the state of Israel that whether you like it or not is a democracy in the region, and there's a lot of discussion. Is there a future for political Islam? And I thought we could unpack it today.
Yeah. I think we need to make a distinction between Muslim and political Islam / Islamist. The Muslim is a person who do everyday practice, believe, behave, and belong. But when it comes to political Islam or political Islamist, and they may behave according to the Islamic traditions and values, may not, but it is more of a ideology rather than a religion. It is modern in every sense. I don't think 200 years ago there was a political Islam such a topic, and all Islam was there, but just like nationalism and political Islam is a reaction to something, and people get confused about it. I think between a Muslim who do everyday life and go to mosque and pray 5 times a day and do fasting and so on and so forth. But the others, who I have seen many of them when I was in Istanbul, right next to the mosques in Istanbul, there are many hookah cafes, right? And many of those political Islamists are simply mingling around these cafes. And you have a call to prayer and nobody goes to mosque. But on those cafes, and they talk about how great Islam is and why the government should be an Islamic government and that Sharia is great. But at the same time, in their everyday practice, they don't do Islam. So I was calling them, you guys are even not a part-time Muslim. You don't go from time to time. If they go to Friday prayers, and we could consider them, they're part-time Muslim, but many of them they don't. But when it comes to especially against the West and against the Western influence on the society, they are so hawkish. And they say, well, no, this is not Islamic, this is not that, this is not that. But in everyday life, I'm not saying all of them, but my observation is that political Islam is just like nationalists are, ideologically committed people, but in their practice, in their daily life, they don't do practice. I think this is my observation. What do you think? So you lived in the West for last 30 years. And can you tell us from your own perspective, those political Islamists in the West or anywhere you wanted to include?
I've lived in the West for 44 years now. I think we should go to the roots, the root of the word politics. In the Middle East, the word siyaset, goes for the word politics. And siyaset comes from the Arabic word to tame a horse, to tame a mule, to tame a wild animal. Humans can be tamed. That's fine. The problem we have is the leaders are not tamed. They think they know everything and they can tame the population. They can tell the people what to do, but they want to exempt themselves. For example, Erdogan, he doesn't mind telling people what to do, but he does mind when people remind him that, politics comes with responsibility. In terms of one other thing I'll say, the average, let's say, pious Muslim that prays 5 times a week and follows the injunctions of Islam and is honest, is truthful, doesn't lie, doesn't cheat his wife. It's a nice, it's a wonderful thing to be moral, to be upright, to be a role model for your children. It reminds me of an observation about Mahatma Gandhi. People used to tell him, "My God, you're like a saint," and he would say, "No, I'm not a saint. I'm a politician. I am doing everything I can to be like a saint, to act truthfully, to love unconditionally, to tolerate people who may have different point of view." True morality requires that. The pious Muslim in Istanbul probably deep in his heart feels that, but the moment he becomes a politician, that goes down the drain. Politics takes over. Islam literally doesn't, leaves the politics out and becomes the driving force, meaning the driving force of the leaders who are on top. And in the West, the essence of politics is compromise. And the compromise comes from different groups expressing their views, and all of them, forming the body politics, and the cooler heads prevailing and paving the way for the happiness of the population, for the security of the population, for the education of the population. We don't have good examples of that in the Middle East. You could maybe talk about some examples just instead of theory.
Yeah. I mean, let me throw you a provocative thing that I know it will maybe trigger you in a way. I was thinking about this politics. This during the Ottoman period when the Ottoman was fallen apart, and the intellectuals and the political elites come up with 3 ideologies. We all know that the Ottomanism, that aims to keep all the subjects of Ottomans, including Christian, Jews, and all others, under one umbrella, under the identity of Ottoman, which did not work when the Balkans simply seceded. But later on, they found out this Islamism, and with the hope that they can keep the empire under the Islamic agenda, Islamic umbrella, and to keep and protect, prevent the secession of the Islamic groups or nations. Later on, and as a last resort, they came up and decided to be a Turkic identity or Turkishness, and they wanted Turkish nationalism. Many people claim that first 2 did not work in a great deal because Islamism did not work and Ottomanism did not work. But I think that Islamism as a political ideology worked at some degree between Turks and Kurds. And remember that, yes, when the Ottomans claimed that we all Muslims under the one ummah, one umbrella, and Arabs rejected, but Kurds accepted Islam as an identity, one unifying identity, and fought with Atatürk and the early founders of Turkey. But later on, the founders simply deceived them and simply betrayed them. We agree that Islamism actually worked with the Kurds, between Kurds and Turks. The idea of Islam and creating and fighting against the West as a Muslim unity.
Yeah, I mean, the Turks were in the driving seat of the empire, and the others were subjects. the British and the French, let's say reached out to, not let's say, but reached out to the Arabs and told them that they could be separate, not because the British loved the Arabs, but because they wanted to reduce the Ottoman Empire to a manageable size, and grow. They wanted to grow themselves. As far as the end of the empire and the Kurds and the Turks, even before the empire, when the Arabs were clamoring for more rights, Jamal Pasha in Damascus, hung the leaders of the Arabs, and even the Kurds, when they were clamoring for more rights, or a little bit of autonomy, if you will. Badr Khan, for example, the Ottomans didn't want to, accept that. They captured him. They exiled him to Crete. Only when he fought against the Greeks, they allowed him to go back to Damascus. Otherwise, they wouldn't let him. He wanted to go back to Jazira, to Botan, but they wouldn't let him. I think the issue is more the is what the Christians say. What belongs to the Caesar is Caesar's, and what belongs to the church is churches, which basically the later Christian thinkers, as well as politicians and philosophers in Europe, have kind of translated that as to mean, politics requires compromise. Islam does not believe in compromise. Islam is the revealed word of God or divine revelation, and the moment it takes over the public space, then it freezes the process called give and take, the process called compromise, and then you have the dysfunctional states that we have in the Middle East. I'll just give you one example. I mean, in 2002, United Nations issued a report, Human Development Report, and in all of the Arab countries, in 2001, apparently, only 330 books had been translated to Arabic. That is 1/5 of the books that had been translated to Greek in the same year. So you have a society that is not really in tune with the world, if you will. It's kind of like frozen in time, and sometimes it thinks it knows everything, and it has the best system, it has the latest model, and how come the world doesn't respect us, or how come the world doesn't take us seriously? Politically, the Middle East is like desert. There's no understanding of the art of politics, and to go back to the examples again, for example, in Turkey, there's the political leaders can sit and say there's no Kurdish people, or the Kurdish language should be banned. A better politician would have said, there are different people, they have a different need. We are a state. Think of it like a car with 4 wheels. And if we say Kurds don't exist, that's like puncturing the wheel of a car. And a car with a flat tire cannot go. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you agree with this? It was the Islam that brought Kemalists and the Kurds together at the beginning of the republic.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think there's something else there that honesty compels me to share with you. Islam, when it was declining, or when Ottoman Empire was declining, it just couldn't accept the fact that they were being defeated by these infidels. So they reacted, and what happened was what had happened to Bulgaria. With the help of Russians, yeah. They got their freedom, autonomy initially, and then freedom. And the Ottomans thought, oh my God, the same is going to happen in Armenia, or where the Armenians live predominantly in eastern Turkey. And so they decided to, when the war came, decided to, unfortunately, extirpate them. And many Turks didn't want to really go live there. And there weren't many Turks who they had their homes in Anatolia, they had their homes in Western Turkey. And the refugees who were coming back from Balkans, some of them were settled in the Kurdish areas, but they didn't really want to stay there because it was Kurdish. They spoke Turkish, so they wanted to go back to Bursa or to Izmit or to Iznik, and those lands then were taken over by the Kurds. And Ataturk and Kurds kind of had a devil's bargain. They said, Ataturk said, technically, Armenians are going. The Western government's trying to set up Armenia. You need to help us, and you could have the land that is now vacant. And so that deal sealed their agreement, and they fought together. But then when things went well for Turkey, I think Ataturk, without Lenin's help, Ataturk had no chance to defeat Greeks. Lenin came to his rescue. Russia has come to Turkey's rescue a lot of times. And then Ataturk, in my opinion, became drunk with power. And he thought he could just dispense with the Kurds. For the last 100 years, we have had instability in Turkey.
I think I'm kind of a little bit disagreeing. Maybe that opportunistic expectation from the Kurdish side, some of them, but the main driver of the Kurds, ordinary Kurds, who are fighting against the infidels, be it in
the Russians.
During the War of Independence in Turkey, that when the Kurds fight against when the Turks fight against the British or Greeks, or agree French to withdraw, and there was some the militia movements against them. Some of them were Kurds, and in even the war in Dardanelles, you see Kurds. The main motivation, the main glue for the Kurds to join was Islam, isn't it? I mean, yeah, I understand that, but the fear that Armenians were kicked out and the West wanted to come and reestablish Armenia, and therefore you don't want to steal your land, you don't want to steal your identity. That's perfectly understandable concern for the Kurds. But when it comes to joining Turkey and the Turkish army, I think it was Islam. Ataturk successfully manipulated Islam, and therefore I think I'm calling that Ataturk until 1923, until the Treaty of Lausanne, he was an Islamist.
Ittihad and Taraqi, the Committee of Union and Progress, I wouldn't call them like pious Muslims. I would call them opportunistic Muslims. And Ataturk was one of them. He could drink his alcohol. He could go to, brothel homes. And he could also, put his fez on and go to mosque and pray.
They were similar to those Zionists who were actually secular, but using Judaism as a means to mobilize people. And I think the Turkish Zionists were the Kemalists, and that's why I'm calling them. They were not much. Maybe they don't call themselves Islamists, but they were using Islam as mobilization tool, weren't they?
Good point. With the Zionist comparison, they drank their alcohol too. They loved women, many women too. There's nothing, in their opinion, there was nothing wrong with that. And many of the, Ataturk was one of them. He liked women as well. I think what the difference with Israel is the European Jews also practiced the art of politics, and whereas Ataturk and his friends practiced the art of politics, but they practiced it with a high dosage of force, power, domination, fear. And that is what we have today, after.
I don't see much difference that the Zionists use the same thing, high dosage of politics, fear, and even the ousting the Palestinians in Israel, and what they do, especially compared to Ataturk, what Ataturk did to Greeks and did to the Kurds later on, once he just simply grabbed the power and settled, and he just forgot all the promises he was given to the Kurds under the umbrella of Islam. That's why I'm trying to make that the Islam as an argument in there. I don't think that what much different. Maybe we can say that Zionists did not simply crush their opponents from within. I mean, I don't remember.
Yeah, good point. No, that's a very good point. I mean, the Zionists didn't really want to work with the Arabs who were in Palestine. Ataturk pretended he was working with the Kurds, and then when he was done with their help, then he turned his back to them, and then he actually went on them with an iron fist the moment they clamored for, let's say, some greater political space. Yeah, I mean, the Zionists within the Zionists, there was I would say there was a better cohesion because of their, like they were coming from Europe, European tradition of parliamentary elections, European tradition of democracy, liberalism. So they were more familiar with the language of compromise, whereas Ataturk himself was an army general. In the army, compromise is a sign of weakness. You're supposed to be hardcore. You're supposed to be a true believer. You're supposed to not compromise. And this is it was the misfortune of French Revolution to have somebody like Napoleon, who came from an army background, and it was the misfortune of Turkish Revolution, who was led by an army guy, and not just him. Ismet Pasha was also from the army.
Yeah, up until Turgut Özal, all the Turkish presidents was up until 1990s. All Turkish presidents was not army leaders.
Yeah, Ecevit was,
no, president.
Yeah, I see.
Ecevit was a prime minister.
Yeah.
Only the first civilian president was Turgut Özal. He becomes a president in 1993 or no, in 1991, and then 2 years later he died. So imagine a country that was founded in 2003 and up until 1992, all the presidents are coming from the military background. Yeah.
I mean, I'll add just one other thing. American system is a civilian-led government. No American president has, donned a uniform. When Turkey attacked Afrin, as you know, Erdogan put on his military uniform. The guy probably doesn't even know how to shoot an AK-47, but he didn't mind coming across like as a tough guy. A better leader would have said, I should come across as representing this country with all its people, with all its diversity, with all its colors. But we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, let's bring the conversation to the Israel and the political Islamists. I mean, when we look at the Ataturk, what they have done, or the other nationalist leaders in the region, we have seen this trend. I mean, if you disagree, please disagree with me. First, it created this secular nationalist resistance forces against the colonialism. Under this, when the nationalism failed in the Wafd Party in Egypt or the Kemalists in Turkey, and nationalists had two fronts: one against those Islamist or Muslim people. They wanted to modernize the Muslim, and therefore they were against the traditional values and Islam and structure of the society, and they wanted to modernize with the top-down approaches. But when it comes to 1970s, especially after the creation of Israel, and we have seen the failures of those Islamists, Jamal Abdel Nasser in 1967 war, and in Turkish cases, They were not managing the economy well, and Turkey was not simply uh, being uplifted by the Kemalist regime. Later on, we have seen that they have to compromise with the masses, and this is where political Islam comes in. And political Islam, therefore, is developed against two fronts. One is against the regime in the regions, regimes in the regions, and also against the colonies or colonialist, imagined or real colonialist argument there. And political Islamists consider these leaders of the regime as the puppets of the West, and therefore they see this as not much different, although the leaders were very much nationalist. And it comes to 1970s, and we saw the emergence of political Islam in certain forms and in certain parties. And of course, later on, we saw the revolution in Iran and the jihadist movement in Afghanistan, and of course, later on in 1990s, Erbakan and AKP came to power in Turkey. And I consider that political Islam, therefore, is not, many people in the West think that political Islam is, political Islamists are the one who simply fight for implementation of Sharia or implementation of Islamic value. But I see more of they fight against something. That's why they failed. Yes, they fought against something, against nationalists, against the West, and they defeated with the public support. But because they did not have any project to offer, and they failed. They failed in Turkey, and they failed in Egypt, and they failed in Tunisia, and they failed in Jordan and elsewhere. Do you agree this assumption more or less, or do you have
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, there are parts I agree, there are parts I disagree. Like for example, in Afghanistan, when the Soviets took control of the country, invaded the country, Americans supported, the Islamists, the Taliban, gave them even Stinger missiles. They had never done that for other groups, and in a way, they subsidized the rise of Islam. Islam became more potent, and it made like Osama bin Laden drunk. He thought he defeated, like Americans thought they defeated the Soviets with the help of the Stingers. Osama bin Laden thought he defeated the Soviets with the help of the prisoners who were taken to Afghanistan with the help of the CIA from Algeria to Egypt to many of the countries in the Middle East. I left Turkey in 1980 before the coup. I have been reading about Turkey, that even Islam became more potent, more Imam Hatip's high schools with Islamic curriculum opened up in Turkey. The problem is, Islamists can come to power if people want to vote for, pious Muslims. I don't have an issue with that. But when Islamists come to power, it doesn't mean the economy is going to do well. It doesn't mean the country is going to excel in terms of standards of living. It just takes over the same government with different people. If you don't have economic plans, if you don't have plans to export or to invest in factories or invest in hospitals, invest in universities, then it doesn't matter whether nationalists are in power or the Islamists are in power. I think in terms of the examples that you cited, I would say Tunisia is still, there's hope. It's the only country that has kind of managed to keep its Muslims and keep its secular components. But that country that you and I know well, Turkey, Erdogan, I think, basically initially showed signs of compromise. when he needed to hold on to his power. But the moment he consolidated his power, he became as authoritarian as Ismet İnönü, or as authoritarian as, actually, I take it back, Ismet İnönü let go of the power, to his credit, as authoritarian as Atatürk, as authoritarian as, maybe even some of the Arab dictators. But one thing I'll add, though, is, I mean, Turkey, my Kurdish friends may not like this, relative to Iraq and relative to Syria, is actually is more open. And, people, yes, there are issues. I don't mean to say Turkey is like Denmark, or is like, Great Britain, but, developments, evolution, the application of liberalism, the democratic spirit, these take time. And I think the biggest deficit we have is piety. I don't have an issue with piety. People need religion in their lives, and we have to respect that. But people also need democratic spirit. People also need tolerance. People also need liberalism. And if Erdogan and his party were to incorporate those ideals, I think then they could have become a good role model for Egypt. I mean, right now, I would say Tunisia is ahead of Turkey, even though Turkey was ahead of Tunisia in terms of its political development. But
I mean, let's come to the Israel. And why do you think that all the political Islamists, regardless of being Turks, Iranian, and Arabs or Kurds, are against Israel?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it has to do with a little bit with Islam. It just doesn't have this idea of letting go. It thinks what it possesses, its property, and it cannot let go of what it has. I think.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah, well, I think when Islam grew from the Arabian Peninsula, in Egypt, people were speaking a different language. In North Africa, people were speaking a different language. In Syria, people were speaking a different language. In Iraq, people were speaking a different language. But Islam, we don't need to get into the history of it. It dominated these areas. These people forgot their languages, became Arabs, and Palestine is part of this geography that I'm talking about. Turks, Kurds, Persians, Indonesians, they managed to hold on to their language. But many of the others didn't. And Israelis, after 2,000 years of living in diaspora, came back. And I don't think many of the Muslims deep down are accepting them. I mean, if Hamas has power, I mean, it will obliterate Israel in a split second.
Yeah, but I just wanted to remind you that after the first time when the Roman Empire came and simply expelled the Jews from Jerusalem, it was Omar, the second caliph, who intentionally brought 80 Jews to the city.
Okay.
And after that, when the Crusaders came back, and they had an issue with Jews again. So it was originally Muslims who brought and in a way created a second coming of the Jews in the city. But right now, Islamists all around the world against this. So isn't it a contradiction that it was one of the most revered caliph, Omar, brought Jews to the city? Now all these Islamists, and many of them are actually, it doesn't matter Sunni or Shia, and they revere Omar, but they are against the presence of Jews in this land.
I'll say two things. Revering the memory of Khalif Omar, the four rightly guided caliphate who followed Prophet Muhammad, 3 of whom were killed by their followers. We have to accept the bloody history of Islam. It's not just wherever Islam goes, peace follows or justice follows. This is a dream today's Muslims attribute to Islam, but if they're honest with themselves, they should study that history, they should learn from it, and they should make the necessary changes to live in a civilized world. When Islamic State established itself, what did they do? They wanted to subjugate the Christians. They wanted to subjugate, if they had taken over Israel, they would have subjugated the Israelis. And what did they do to the Yazidis? They slaughtered them. They took 7,000 Yazidi women and they sold them in the markets. And they laughed about it. And they were supposed to be, pious Muslims fighting for an ideal called Islamic State. But to get back to your example, Prophet Muhammad and his followers, Muslims, to this day think Islam is the latest model, it's the latest religion, it's the best religion, and they tolerate the people of other, like the peoples of the book, meaning the Christians and the Jews, as subjects, not equals. And good luck to Yazidis, good luck to Buddhists, good luck to Japanese, that they're infidels. And the Khalif Omar might have brought some Jews, but the last 1400-year history of Islam shows us that this supremacy, it's like the white supremacists believe in white race, and Muslim supremacists believe in the Muslim faith. Today's world requires that I have, as a Muslim, I say, I respect my Christian neighbor, I respect my Jewish neighbor, and I hope and pray he respects me. What do we have today? I mean, just a couple of years ago, Erdogan converted Hagia Sophia, the largest mosque in Istanbul. Church. There was a museum to mosque again. That's like rubbing it the wrong way. I mean, it's not sowing the seeds of tolerance. It's not cultivating a friendship. And Israel. I think we should talk about one other thing about Israel. It in spite of all its faults, it is a vibrant democracy. It owes that tradition to the fact that for 2,000 years Jews were abroad. And I think, if Erdogan or if Bashar al-Assad or if Iranian leaders want to be humble, they should say we should learn from them. We should look at them and see how they, manage this diverse society and have a vibrant economy and have a higher standard of living. And we possess more natural resources. We have more land. We have better nature, and we deliver misery to our people.
Well, I think I'm kind of a little bit disagreeing with you on the definition and how Islam kind of an invade. Well, when you think of Islam and in practices, it was the first constitution of Muhammad that's signed between Jews of Medina and Muslims of Medina, and actually it was pretty equal at the time. It was pretty progressive. And later on, Umar is the one who brought the Jews, and actually should be given credit to, while the others and Christians in the region were considering that Jews are, untouchables, and so on and so forth. And for a long time, yes, a Muslim world was kind of a bloody, and you had more or less some conflicts, but this was not the level of the conflict that was brought by the nationalism and ideologies in the region. I think the causes of the current conflict is not about the Islam per se. Yeah, I understand that Islam as a religion is a dominating religion. And also we have seen that Islam is also got to find a way to deal with the Hindus in India when they came and created a Mughal empire. But I think we need to make a distinction that Islam as an ideology, as a political Islam, and Islam as a religion and the authority in the region, which was, I think, I would consider at the time was much more peaceful in the region. Therefore, I see that the political Islamists today all over the world are against Israel, not because they are more Muslim, not because Islam dictate them, because they kind of use Islam as an ideology. And one of the foundation of this ideology is against the West and against Israel. And therefore, they see Israel as a Western project in this region, Western colonialist project. And therefore, they were kind of rejecting. I don't know whether you like it or not. This is how they see it. I disagree with them to certainly. I think Israel should be where it is. I think it should be a model, by the way, in terms of its democracy, in terms of the justice system. I think the Middle East should learn more from Israel rather than fight. But this is how I see. Islamists should not be, equated to the Islam itself. Am I wrong?
During the Roman Empire and the Persian empires, they used to address each other as "dear the other eye of the world," meaning like the Persians were one eye of the world and the Romans were the other eye of the world. When both kind of imploded, had major issues, that's when Islam rose and it dominated the Middle East. And during the Middle Ages, yes, relative to the rest of the world, Islamic world was peaceful, was advancing, was progressive. But then, Europe caught up, and Europe, just to give you an example, in 1144 from China, paper came to Europe. In 1453, it made it to Istanbul. Paper, which is, the essence of civilization, if you will.
Came through Ottoman territory.
Came through Egypt. Ottomans were not by then in Egypt.
Okay.
So we're talking about numbers. In 1453, for example, you and I went to Turkish public schools. Turks say the Middle Ages ended, the New Age started. Victor Hugo has a different definition for how New Age started. He says in 1453, Gutenberg invented the printing press in the city of Mainz. That's when the Middle Ages ended. I kind of like that definition better than taking over a city, conquering a city, enslaving a population, or dictating to a population. But going back to Israel, I don't think Islam has managed to address the issue of how to live with the others. Within a pure Muslim society, you could, Islamic State tried to create the 6th century Islam, 7th century Islam, and thank God it didn't last, because they wanted to do it with blood, they wanted to do it with violence, they wanted to in 2024. I don't think politics is broken as a tool in the hands of Muslims. The moment they want to practice Islam, like they want to use politics as an Islamic tool. My 2 cents as a student of the region, as a native of the region, and as a student of history, is we need to separate, just like in the West, people separated the church and the state. State is an art. The politics is, it requires artists. It requires people who know how to compromise. And inside, I can be a Muslim, I can be a Yazidi, I can be a Jew, I can be a Christian. The state I live in needs to protect me, needs to honor me, needs to respect me. And then it will have my allegiance, then it will have my support. Otherwise, it will not. And many in the Middle East, I would say, are unhappy because we are not interacting with the rest of the world and learning from them. We think we know it. We have this hubris. We have this arrogance, and arrogance doesn't get you very far.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation goes on and on, Kani. It's been for the 5 minutes. Normally we were planning 30 minutes, but I think the 5 minutes should be okay too. And let's continue this discussion in coming weeks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kani.